That $100 per cold call per meeting I set got me the engagement ring with my wife. It paid the rent for my apartment, and it allowed me to go to weddings of my buddies that were doing much better than I was. But on the flip side, we sold a company, and it was a very, very amazing, lucky story. So it all balances out.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Scott Havens. Scott earned a degree in strategic communications from the University of Kansas after spending much of his college career in several entrepreneurial ventures, including running a bartending service business. He is now an executive and the youngest stockholder of Hub International, one of the largest privately held insurance brokerages in the world. In his spare time, he is a master networker, facilitating 11 executive peer groups while sitting on multiple boards, including the Arts and Recreation Foundation of Overland Park, Blue Valley Recreation and Youth Programs, Big Brother Big Sisters of Greater Kansas City, Boys and Girls Club of Greater Kansas City, Newhouse Women's Domestic Violence Shelter, and Casey Single Mom. He also serves as the president of Top Gun Kansas City, which is the largest peer group of its kind for young executives with 180 members. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Scott.
Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good morning to you. Let's talk about, you're the VP and a partner at Hub International, correct?
Sounds much more important than it is.
So we're going to dive into your career and all that. So I start the podcast out with two questions that I ask every guest. So we're on Zoom live here, and I can see you have a beautiful 3/4 pullover and probably a blue KU shirt. But what are you wearing below the desk?
So it's actually a company thing, because I'm meeting with an organization that I actually have to talk about what I do for a living, which is unique. But then I have a commission painting right here by, I think they were 1.5 and 3.5 at the time. So it's my little girl Kate and my son Nick. They're now 3 and 5. So yeah, I'm just rocking and rolling it. Just like anything, when it's live, you're on Zoom. People come in. Can't really stop it. So, how is your day going? How's your morning going?
Mine myself, it's going phenomenal. I'm very excited to have you. I know you have two of your own podcasts, and we'll get into that later. I know you are on many boards, and you do a lot of peer groups. So, second question I always like to ask: so, growing up, what did you want to be?
It sounds really silly. I wanted to be in sales. My mom and dad, my mom is from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and she moved to Kansas City with 3 boys under the age of 5, going to school at night, selling furniture, straight commission. And my father, not originally from Kansas City, but grew up here later in life, was in medical device sales and later technology sales. So you do what your parents want to do. And so I was one of those weird people that actually knew that I wanted to do it. I just didn't think I'd end up in insurance.
Yeah, you don't really see that too often. Like, yeah, I want to be in sales.
Yeah, so I didn't know it at the time. I was listening to Malcolm Gladwell. I think it was either Tipping Points or David and Goliath. The audience can correct me, but I realized I was dyslexic when I was 28. So I just knew that I never really got positive accolades in the classroom. It was something that I struggled with. It was just processing, and sought a lot of attention socially and in sports, just because that's where you got the instant gratification from. So I knew that to do something for a living and make money, you had to be smart. And I did not think I was smart. And so I thought, I saw sales as a way of working hard and communicating, but not necessarily having to study to be an engineer or to be an accountant or to be a nurse, just because that required a certain level of intellect and the ability to take a test, which was not my strength.
Outside of your parents, what was the first thing or the first person you sold something to?
Oh man, that's a great question. Well, I probably sold my peers into doing things they shouldn't have been doing. So got into a lot of trouble. I always joke around. Now it's funny, but at the time wasn't. I ran an alcohol ring when I was 15 before I had a driver's license for the Blue Valley School District. So I went to Northwest, but it's not a good thing. But I had my fun meter tapped at a young age. So if it was Tuesday night and you're 15, 16, I was like, where was the party? And so, it was really just selling people on throwing weird and wacky parties, which is a skill set later in life if you can harness it. But at the time, it was a lot of fun, but probably not a good thing.
Wow, it was almost like you were the under 21 prohibition ringleader in Blue Valley.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. Yeah, they park your cars on the next street and let's everyone sneak in the dark of night. Yeah, there was a whole system. It was like we were an assembly line getting ready for a party. So, but again, not a good thing. Don't encourage it. A lot of people that are our age have children around middle school, high school, so they probably don't like that.
So did you have in junior high school, a sales type position where you actually got paid?
So yeah, I worked a ton of different jobs. The job that made me the most money was I got fired from being a lifeguard. And then I went back to the pool that I knew and they gave me the contract for the whole pool. So, I'd make about $38,000 a summer and be broke by spring break every year at the University of Kansas. That was while running a bartending staffing business where you got basically half price at all the bars because you hired the bartenders. So, there was a wide variety of different businesses, but waiting tables, working hard labor, Papa Murphy's, just anything and everything was, if you can make a buck doing it, I was all about it.
What gave you the idea to do a bartending staffing business in college? I think that's phenomenal.
So there were certain bars at the University of Kansas that I think with drinking and driving in the mid 2000s, people really became hyper focused on where they could walk in a great way. And so all the other bars really struggled for the first time to get people to go to them because the college kids want to walk there. So what we did was the campus was spread out into different sections, but we would pick off the coolest guy or girls or guys or girls from each section of the campus, and we'd bring them together on certain nights of the week. So that way you could pull a large group of people and it became a little bit of a happening where people wanted to go outside of the traditional places you could walk. And we thought it'd be cool to get a half price off drinks and make a dollar off of the cover. So I did it with a buddy of mine. He now runs a hedge fund of a multi-billion-dollar agricultural firm. So I'm selling insurance. I think he did a really good job compared to what I did, but it was a racket that we did that we thought was really fun.
Interesting. I always feel it's difficult for an 18-year-old to determine, what they want to major in. So I noticed that you were a strategic communication major, which kind of makes sense, but a minor in psychology. So talk about, how you pick the majors, especially the psychology portion.
Jeff, I love that you're answering. So I'm going to give you a totally different answer. So I get the luxury of speaking at the University of Kansas Business School a lot. Now, I was never allowed there when I was in school, but I joke with the undergrad that now they have to listen to me. But my first slide is my education, which is the bull, hawk, wheel, best 5 years of my life. And then I follow it up with, I squeezed a 3-year degree into 5 years. So, I'm very blunt. I was not at school for school. I wanted to graduate because at the time that was what society wanted you to. I think if it was today, I don't know if I would have done it, but graduating college was probably the hardest thing I ever had to do. And it was an easy degree. It wasn't like a hard degree, but for me to process information, and a lot of it was writing papers and communications in psychology. And when your grammar isn't the best as someone that's a little dyslexic, it was definitely not easy to do. But, I always wanted to understand how people think and what they do. Today, I think that's more repetition, that old 10,000 hour rule. If you do it over and over again, you can get good at it. I think if you try to read people too much, it comes across as unauthentic or trying to game the system. And we're human beings. You can't trick someone into doing something. You want two parties to come together to discuss it, to find what's going to be the best end game. And so at the time, psychology just came naturally to me, but honestly, I think it was easier than the other classes. When the teacher would say, look to your left and look to your right, one of you won't be here, I dropped the class. There's a place called Strong Hall. So I went and dropped it. My friend's like, you should give it a shot. I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah. And strategic communication was the one you couldn't get into the business school, right? Basically, a lot of people go that route.
Well, so let me preface this. It's a great degree, and there's a lot of really smart people in there. And a lot of people did it prior to law school. I bet that was less than 10%. A lot of people I don't want to degrade the degree and what people did, but I was the lowest of the low on the totem pole. So yeah, it was like, hey, Scott, I know you want to do journalism because my older brother did it. And they're like, you're going to graduate in 7 years. I was like, how did I graduate in 5? They're like, communications. I was like, done. So that was my thought process. It wasn't anything more. I knew general studies was not looked upon well. So I thought strategic communications was a fancy way of saying I graduated.
So talk a little bit more, like you mentioned, if you were maybe graduating high school this May, you may have not pursued a college degree. Expand on that a little bit more, Scott.
So I talk a lot about to the kids at the business school that on average, the average household income makes $54,000 a year as a household. So, two parents, children, that's what they make. Well, at a state school, typically, if not more, the average cost of a year of going to school is $54,000. And so my mom and dad are amazingly nice people, and they sacrificed really hard for me and my brothers to go to school. Now that price has gotten, I think my brother's 3 years younger, but that price had close to doubled by the time he had gotten to school. So I don't know what school costs today or what it's going to cost, but I think for the first time ever, we're going to see a flattening. So I think it's a little unique, but the cost of school is really going to go network with the wealthiest 90% or top 10%, but no one ever takes that advantage of it. A lot of people don't. They're there to get an education, they're there to get a degree, but really it's probably the wealthiest room they'll ever be in is their classrooms. And a lot of those that are in school today, that state school, have a pretty high likelihood of not being able to send their children to that school unless they're getting a degree that's a noun, an accountant, an engineer, a nurse. And so if I would have known what I know today, and I would have had the education on how to be good in business, I probably would have not have gone, or I would have made a giant mistake and I would have been a poor steward of my parents' money by allowing them to send me to school. Because if you don't get a good degree at a state school, it is a ton of money to go onto the workforce to make 40 grand and just be taught a really harsh reality. You go from financially the top of the ladder down to the lowest, and you may never get back up.
Yeah, interesting. I think universities today are at a tipping point. They're going to have to evolve and change to really accommodate what's really needed, right? Their model, it's almost like newspapers and, Hallmark cards. I mean, they're, it's a dying, those are dying industries. And I think universities are following that path, just my opinion, obviously.
Yeah, it's more like an all-inclusive resort with the University of Missouri having a lazy river and 2 recreation facilities and dining. And it's just more and more to get you to go there and less sometimes on the education side. Now, Not saying that about all degrees. I'm just saying a huge chunk of them, well over 50% of them, are not degrees that have a market value.
So you took your 3-year program, graduated in 5 years. You walked down the hill on that Sunday in May. Did you already have a job secured? What was your, the start of your career, your professional career journey?
So when I walked, all the guys that had already graduated went and walked down with me again. And they're like, "Hey, Haven's graduated." Everyone's like, "I had no idea he was going to graduate." So we got champagne bottles, didn't listen to the procedure, and just walked down spraying champagne. And was, again, not a good thing, but since we're friends, I love sharing that. But I walked into the world probably being rejected about 60, 70 jobs. I took a ton of personality exams, and I ended up waiting tables at the Blue Moose, and I only got the lunch section. So like the best section's at night, and then, the cocktail section's better than that, and then bartending's better than that. And I went from running a bartending and staffing business to begging for a job at the Blue Moose. And the restaurant just opened. And so it just speaks to what the recession was like. And that was 2010. And then I got a job cold calling door to door a year later for a company called Worldwide Express. And I cold called every door on foot, 71,000 companies in the metropolitan from Warrensburg, St. Joe, Leavenworth, Raymore Peculiar, Lawrence, Kansas, even Sedalia. And so every 3.5 months, I had to get a new pair of black shoes, because when you get out of the car, your left shoe wears out. And then I spent the next 3 to 4 years, when I got a job at an insurance company, cold calling in a queue. No one would meet with me because I had nothing to offer, but I found that meeting with people that were unemployed was the best way to get people to take a meeting with me. And after you do 6, 7 meetings a day, including weekends before I had kids, you end up running out of people to meet. But, if you don't have a skill set or something you can offer to people, you have to figure out what that is and what value that is. Now, that's an extreme example, but, with extreme examples come extreme payoffs.
Yeah, phenomenal. As a kid growing up, did you have that kind of grit and resilience? That's phenomenal that, you just kept grinding. You're working at the Blue Moose, and you're just, okay. And then you get a job, you're literally door to door. Could you actually call people at the logistics provider when you first started, or you literally had to go face to face?
It was 95% face to face, 5% you would call on your way out into the field and then your way out. But the only time you'd use the phone is when you were calling to set up a meeting. So you'd pretend like you know everything about your company, and you're like, "Hey, how does Tuesday, Thursday work next week, 10:15 a.m.?" You just made up stuff. So, but have you ever seen the movie Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion?
Oh yeah, it's been years, but yeah.
Okay, I'm glad this didn't fall place. But for the younger viewers, that is where they go to a high school reunion, and the guy that was the man in high school is a loser. Right. And that was my fear. And I bet up until a year ago, still my fear. And I never wanted to be that loser that was, I never bullied anyone, because I never knew it was on the test. So it was nice to everyone. I always can tell who people are that know me because they know I've never been mean to anyone, genuinely. And so it was very popular in school and in college. But I felt like because I was so popular, a lot of people wanted to see me fail. And I was definitely on that failure course. And so I chose to try to dig my way out of it, because I didn't want to be a loser to other people. I don't know if that makes sense, but I didn't want to be that guy that thought he was awesome and then was a huge loser. So I think that's why I worked hard.
Yeah, most high school students that are supplying alcohol are pretty popular.
Yeah, you get a lot of friends. Yeah, everyone's like, "Oh, be nice to that guy." But I wish I had a better answer that was more of what it is. But that's just what it is. I guess that's what I feel in my heart. And if I had a better answer, I may redo it. But I just didn't want to be that loser. I just wanted to work hard.
And whether it was in college or when you first started your sales career, who's the first big influence on you from a sales selling philosophy?
I think we've actually talked about this, and then I had like went back to like one of my heroes early on. I went back to her, and I just was like really unique, and like it didn't pan out the way I thought it would. Want to like say, hey, thank you, and all these great things, but I had a big belief that I thought it was a really good secret hack that you could have 1,000 mentors. I think when you're growing up, you're like, oh, I need a mentor, one, maybe two. And I thought to myself, there's that old Mark Twain quote that every man or woman is my master in some way, shape, or form, whether it's the person sweeping the street or whether it's the CEO. And I genuinely believe that because I felt it, because I knew there were things that I was incapable of and I needed help from everyone. And so I think influentially, someone like yourself, Jeff, that met with me early on in my career, and a lot of other people that took time was all part of that process that influenced me. And the other thing is not one system works. And so another quote, Bill Self, the University of Kansas, said his greatest expertise or greatest gift is being a chameleon. And I thought that was really disingenuous. I was like, that's not good. You're supposed to be authentic, supposed to be genuine. You can't be everything to everyone. But as I got older, I realized that being a chameleon is still being genuine. It's just meeting people where they are. And so I think a variety of mentors and meeting people where they are is the influence of many others like yourself.
Yeah, and I really didn't realize how actually young you were when we first met. But I always thought you were, just wise beyond your years. But I won't go into your accolades yet. But I've always admired you and what you've done at such a young age. So we're in a little bit different demographic, but it's all good.
Well, likewise, Chip. I mean, I admire you because you always want to help people. And I always break it down. You've heard me say it again. There's 95% of people that are really, really nice. We live in the Midwest. Everyone's nice. No one moves here for the beachfront properties. And then there's the 5% that genuinely always want to help. And it's just rare. And I just, you are someone in that 5% that everyone you meet, even though you're wanting to progress different things, it's still secondary to you wanting to help other people. And that's just really unique.
Well, thank you. Let's go back to when you were first setting up meetings and you talked about unemployed people. So what was your thinking there? Obviously they would meet and you're trying to help them maybe. What was your strategy there?
Another context to put in there now at this day and age, 2022, it wasn't this way. This is thinking like 2012, 13, 14, but another group was the Women Who Mean Business group. They would always meet with me and they're always very kind. But now that I have time to set up the context of it, is two totally different groups. I'm not relating people that are unemployed to the Women Who Be Good. Is I'm putting it as two groups of people that are very open to taking care of people. And I think the Women in Business is one of the best groups in Kansas City. But when someone is in between, I would pretend that I had all this knowledge of jobs that were going on. And I had a little bit. And I would meet with people and I would inform them of different things that were going on. And I'd introduce them to other people. So my value was, I know Jeff, I heard this startup millennial company's hiring, and they would walk away from the meeting being like, I got to meet Jeff and I heard this good information. That Scott guy, he's in tune. He knows he's got a pulse on things. And then over and over and over, as the world gets smaller and smaller, you kind of do know about, I would say 30% because you only have to bat 300 to go to the Hall of Fame. But, in general, companies over 50 employees, I typically know 30% of the entire leadership team, and I probably know a good chunk of the other companies, but just don't know them personally.
So I think it's phenomenal that you came out of school, though, and you really, and I grew up in a different era. I grew up in the era professionally where I was the first generation of workers, professionals that didn't have a job for life at a company, right? We weren't going to get the gold watch after 30 years and yada, yada, yada. So, but you just really, networking or the power of building relationships wasn't really a thing when I first got out of college, right? You were kind of insulated. It was just a different time. But how did you really because you're phenomenal at it. I mean, you're there to help. And when we met, you were phenomenal. You introduced me to a ton of great people. But how did you evolve to get that way of thinking?
So thank goodness you and I are on the same wavelength, because I can give you references and you'll know it, but the audience will be like, what's he talking about? But do you remember Wayne's World 2 when Chris Farley was getting shot with tennis balls?
Right.
And they said, why are you here? And he said he had nowhere else to go. Well, I had nowhere else to go. So again, I wish I could give you a great answer, but I do believe in when I mentor people or I talk to people, I'm the name tag and Sharpie guy. I get the coffee, I open the door, but when you bring everyone in a room together, you automatically are the person that's I don't want to say the highest, but you're the most well received out of familiarity. So since you brought everyone together, they like you. And so, in running 9 peer groups, sitting on 5 boards, 2 podcasts, 4 speakeasies, I'm a big believer in bringing the group together. And one thing I don't share a lot, but hopefully not. Well, I hope a lot of people listen, but hopefully too many people aren't listening. But I try to now have some privacy. But one of my proudest moments of my careers was last Friday. ACG, a great group, Association for Capital Growth, heavily recommend joining it, and FEI, Financial Executives for International, come together every year at the beginning of the year to have an economist speak. It's one of the most well-attended events. Well, it's back to that 95-5 rule. 95% salespeople, and I know those groups will argue with me, which is fine. I'm ready for it. And then there's 5% of decision makers that are not on their board, that are the CFO, the CEO, the president. On Friday, I put together 45 of them with Terry Dunn as the guest speaker and had 5 times as many more decision makers as a room of 300-400 people. And there was no social media, nothing was on it. Everyone showed up for their 90 minutes. They left with no business cards. And these are all groups that run independently on their own. So I run 5 of these when I call operating executive peer groups, but it was a dream of mine to do it. I did not want it to be on the same date that this other group was, but it showed me that people want to get together with their peers and they don't want to pay a dollar for it, as opposed to hearing a great economist and seeing a bunch of great people, but all those people want something from them. So how do you put together a room where no one wants anything and they all respect each other and they can get back to their day and be productive? And that is from 10 years of networking. So it wasn't an overnight deal. It was a culmination. And I had a lot of people tell me I was an idiot for doing it. And it felt rewarding that when I competed against, I think, one of the best products in Kansas City, and there was a really good attendance, 5 times better than the other competition, or not competition. I think this competition. I knew it was a good idea.
Yeah, wow, that's great. But do you think these peer groups, again, I think it's an outside, I know Top Gun, I can't name them all, is one of them you founded. But I mean, do you see the kind of the roots of that idea back when you were working with the bars in Lawrence that were kind of spread out and driving this, where you brought groups together? Is that kind of where that idea sprung out of?
100%. Yeah. I mean, we just failed a ton, but we had fun doing it. And we got used to people telling us we were idiots. We got used to telling us the idea wasn't any good, but they would show up. And so, I think it's kind of like, it's cool to be like, I don't know. The more you don't care, the cooler you are. Well, as adults, it's not much different. If you pretend you don't care, no one's going to think of you as being weird. But, if you give someone a product that they want, they're going to show up. Understanding the psychology of what they want is really hard. And a lot of people don't realize with business events, it's so much psychology on what to do, from where it's located, the time of the week, how long the meeting is, who's going to be there, what's the topic, why are we getting together? Is it communicated 3 months in advance? Is there a reminder the week before? Is there a reminder the week of? Is there easy parking? Does the population revolve around where the location is going? So once you put, those 27 different factors together, you can put together an event. Now you just need a decade of networking to find the group of people that would go to it. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people make, is they throw out an idea and they put it together and they just think it's going to happen, which is awesome. but are they willing to do it over and over and over again to fine tune it to make it great? And I think that's just like any entrepreneur, just fail a bunch and then you figure out what doesn't work. You're not figuring out what's worked. You're just figuring out what doesn't work. Right. And I think I'm on that journey with networking and peer groups of what doesn't work. So I don't think I've figured out by any means. I can just tell you what doesn't work.
How old were you when you developed your first professional peer group, and which one was it?
So the only peer group that's public was started 9 years ago called Top Gun Kansas City. That's the largest millennial business group. And it was started at, this is how long, what's that bar that's by Firebirds? Brew Top, it was around. So yeah. Brew Top, and was with a couple buddies. And I give another reference. I call it Shawshank Redemption, where you had to ask to go to the bathroom. Back in the day when, you're a millennial in the recession and, your boss was like, what are you doing? You're like, oh, can I go to the bathroom? They're like, oh, yeah, that's fine. Be back here shortly. And you're like, right away. And so we would meet at 7:00 at night. And then fast forward, we've helped start a group called The Loop, which is a Gen Z group that Emerson Hodis runs and came up with, uses a lot of the strategies that Top Gun does, but they meet at 7:00 at night. So they're 20 somethings, and now Top Gun is mid 30s. So, but that was 9 years ago, and that was the first professional one. And then when I realized about when you make something public, you have to be intentional. When you receive praise from the Business Journal and from Ingram's and from Startland, you need to be a reflection of Kansas City. Now, Top Gun's 100% funded by my wife and I. So we're private. Unlike Centurions, we don't have a $500,000 budget, 43-year history, but we want to be diverse. We want to represent different parts of Kansas City because we choose to. Back to the genuineness. Don't pay $1. People show up because they choose to show up. That's what creates the longevity of the group. And I tried to get a bunch of people to drop at the beginning of the year because I really want to get down to 100 people. So we've gone all the way up to 160, and it went from 120 to 117. So I didn't accomplish my goal of getting 20 people to drop, but it's because I think it's a good product that people like for now. And if I'm not being diligent of what works or what people want, they'll drop.
And what made you pick Top? I mean, that the millennial group. What made you pick that first?
It's all I had. It was I know, and there was no executive group I could pitch. I always thought there would be a need for a CFO group, and then I realized that a lot of CFOs become COOs and presidents and CEOs, and so that's what the group's formed into. But it starts out as a CFO. But on the Top Gun group, I felt like nothing else was out there. I felt like a lot of the current groups that were out there that for younger people were like a stepping stone. Like it was a river. You went through it, but you didn't stay there like a lake. And so I wanted to create a lake where people could come of age forever and grow in the business community.
So you started in the logistics, then you went to sell insurance. Now, was that, I know it wasn't Hub, but Truss, did you go to?
Yeah, great memory. So Truss was two mergers of Crutcher, Heartland, and Power Group. They both would be over 50 years old today. And then they merged together to form Truss. And then 7 of my partners and I took over Truss, and then we sold it to Hub. And so we've been working at Hub now for 4 years. And in the last 2 years, we've hired 55 people. And the thing that we're most proud of is out of those 55, 53 were referred by people in the office that work there. And all 55 are from Kansas City. So those 55 people would actually make up the 6th largest insurance agency by themselves in Kansas City. So I think outside of marrying our spouses, it was the luckiest thing that we did. When we were selling our company, we really needed to pay attention to Hub, but the company's close to doubled in size since we've been there to be the 5th largest insurance company in the world and the largest privately held in the world. And so for context, we have a great company on the plaza in Kansas City, and it's doubling that by the end of the year. So it's a good group, and its secret sauce is just the middle market. A lot of people focus on the Fortune 5,000, where Hub just really focuses on the middle market businesses. So companies with 50 employees, 100 employees, 200 employees, those make up way more business than the Fortune 5,000.
So in your day-to-day role at Hub, like what's a typical day for you?
6 to 7 meetings, and none of it is with insurance. Today someone referred me into an opportunity where they want to talk about insurance. That's incredibly rare. It's awesome, but really it's just connecting people. I work with companies over 100 employees on their healthcare benefits. There are only 850 out of 71,000. 425 of them purchase insurance in a different type of way, maybe not the most transparent. So we work with the folks that purchase in a different way, which is called self-insured. And so the odds of me meeting a CFO of those 425 companies out of 3.8 million people in Kansas City is like 0.00001. So I'm not a good referral partner with people, even though I can generate business for different businesses, but I have to be on my toes at all times because I never know who someone goes to church with, who their neighbor is, who their relative is, who a former coworker is. And so it's kind of that. What I do every day is I try to interact with as many people as possible and then try to find those opportunities for my business partner, Melissa Ford. And so she's 43 from a small town, Clinton, Missouri. I think she's the best in Kansas City at what she does. And then my other partners do a wide variety of things, whether it's railroads, manufacturing, or the largest insurer of cannabis in the world, trucking. So, it's really just having my antennas up and listening and genuinely recommending an opportunity if people are interested. But the vast majority of the time, what I do for a living has nothing to do with insurance.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Did you have a career? I mean, once you got into insurance, did you start developing a career strategy?
No, so I developed a book of business, and then someone told me they'd give me $100 per cold call meeting I set up. So funny enough, 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting. It's one of the largest hospitals in the state of Kansas, and there's a cold call I got paid $100 for. Well, my coworkers now each make over $100,000 in reoccurring revenue on that account. So I lost that deal. But the point is when you have nowhere to go and you're starting out, no one can make money if they pay you what you're worth. They have to make money on you. And some people take really extreme advantage of people and some people don't. I think generational wealth teaches their children how not to get taken advantage of and what the value is worth because they know it. And I think if you don't know what your value is worth, you just do it. But that $100 per cold call per meeting I set got me the engagement ring with my wife. It paid the rent for my apartment, and it allowed me to go to weddings of my buddies that were doing much better than I was. So, but on the flip side, we sold a company and it was a very, very amazing, lucky story. So it all balances out, but it went from doing business development simplistically for the whole company to then finding Melissa Ford that we had already worked with each other. She was just getting kids out of diapers, and I was just, trying not to be hungover on Monday. And we just found each other at the same time. And she's just an amazing human being. I trust her with my life. Her and my wife run my life, Julie. But if it wasn't for Melissa, I don't think we would have developed the largest employee benefits book of business in Kansas or Kansas City. And we're both pretty young. So I'm 36, she's 43. So we accomplished that at a young age. But if it wasn't for her, I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing today.
To do what you're doing in terms of, 8 or 9 peer groups and all those things. So are you you're doing a lot of events. So are you a great event planner? Are you organized?
Yeah. So I try to do everything 6 months in advance. So I think that's the only stress I have in my life is if something gets to like 3-4 months out and I haven't planned it. So I have a shot clock in my mind on when to do those things. But back to the failure, I know a lot of things that don't work. So I know where to have things, what time of the day, how to communicate, and what's going to get people going to go to those meetings. So a lot of trial and error over a decade. So, but yeah, I plan every meeting. I get the name tags. I get the coffee. And the number one thing I do is I make sure everyone goes around the room to share about themselves. And so, Jeff, you've been in many of those rooms. For the life of me, I don't know why people don't do it. I can tell you what, no one ever is excited to go listen to an expert. They don't want to hear an hour of an expert. They want to interact. Now, a good friend of ours, Harry Campbell, who's one of the best public speakers in the country and is here in Kansas City. That's different. There's about 10 of those people in Kansas City. But outside of that, I love Jeff and I love Scott, but no one's going to want to hear us talk about marketing, insurance, or sales. And so what people really want is to talk about themselves. Everyone's favorite word is their name, and everyone's favorite topic is themselves. So just give them what they want, have it centrally located, communicated clearly, and have it be around a bunch of people that are really successful.
Well put, Scott. Notice I used your name there. So do you use any type of productivity tools or, organizational tools? Like, how do you keep track of that, that event planning 6 months in advance? What kind of tools and systems are you using?
So because I don't know anything about what I do for a living, there's lots of room up here. So I don't become an expert in anything. So I'm able to be a half an inch deep and a mile wide. So people used to insult me and say that you're never going to get anywhere being an inch deep and a mile wide. So now I tell people I'm a half an inch deep and a mile wide. But, I think it allows me to remember things that are going on with Jeff's family, things that you and your wife are doing, things about the Mediterranean diet and having a big salad that you have each morning, that you and Harry Campbell have worked with each other for 32 years. All those things allow me to pick up and retain information that I wouldn't be able to do if I had to learn anything. And the two metrics I use are more metaphors. And one gentleman that actually told me, that made fun of me for an inch deep and a mile wide, is actually someone I take advice from. So it goes both ways. He always says, if I get on my bike and I pedal hard every day, things will be fine. It's probably that old Confucius saying, any man that wakes up before the sun rises, his family will never be poor. But the other metric I use is from a guy that he's a business development guy, and he's very successful for a construction company. And he says he's got to pump the well. Well, if you don't pump the well every day, the water goes down to the bottom. But if you pump it every day, the water is always overflowing. And so what I do is 7 days a week. Now Gen Z, if they're listening, that's not a work-life balance. It's not that bad. But if you focus 7 days a week and maybe an hour on a weekend, not work, but just doing things, I think you keep that well it continues to overflow.
Safe to say that you're one of the most well-connected people in Kansas City. But how do you keep track of it all? I mean, is it all in your mind, or do you use some kind of CRM or some kind of note-taking tool like Evernote or something like that?
LinkedIn and in my head. Okay. So I just friend people on LinkedIn that I've met with, and so the people, and I don't have 30,000. Erin Folk's the most well-connected person in Kansas City that I do a podcast with, Drinks with Leaders. So she by a long shot. I'm more in person. So we started the Drinks with Leaders show that you've been on multiple times because she was the Business Journal named her the most best online networker and me the best in-person networker. I'm pretty sure I paid for it. I don't think Erin paid for it, or they associated us together. But I mean, I always say, my sample size of 11,000 people is just in-person meetings. So if you do the math, 7 times, if you're from the area and you meet 7 people a day over time, you do accumulate those. It's just not giving up. But then also the other part is most people only need to go about a year. I call it a crusade. You only have to go like a year of a crusade to meet a bunch of people, and you have a really big network. Most people, Cam Bishop reference as a corporate refugee. They're within their 4 walls, or they have a kid. They live in Johnson County, or they live in Liberty, but they have a killer network in Seattle because they travel there for their client. So, I mean, that's just a lot of folks. So if you hit it hard for a year, you have a giant network. If you hit it hard for 3 years, you're one of the most well-connected people in the city. The people that end up getting to do it for more than a decade, it's luck. It's that they have a job that has them doing it. So the network is a product of luck, and then also not being good at anything else. So I end up doing what I'm good at.
So what's your big reveal in terms of your personality? Like something about you, a lot of people will say superpower, but the thing about you that most people don't know that's really a talent of yours, what would you say that is?
I don't really have one. I mean, I shotgun beers with my teeth. That seems to be a big one. that a lot of people in the business community like. But a lot of these personality traits, sometimes my competitors use it against me to say that, is this person professional or are they doing what they're doing? But I think of it as, if you are who you are, you never have to change anything. And so, to your point of a superpower, I'd love to ask you that question if you'd answer it on your own podcast. But I think the thing that I'm good at is I work with working moms. I find that if you can get someone that is already doing 17 jobs, having them do an 18th or 19th one isn't that hard. So my superpower is not mine, but I think it's just partnering with working moms, because what they can do is so much more than I believe other people can. Jeff, what do you think your superpower is?
Oh, we're turning the tables here. You asked me the first time I did drinks with leaders. I think you're a phenomenal interviewer, even though it's not a deep dive interview podcast every Tuesday at 3:00 Central. Go on LinkedIn, a little promo there. But I mean, you asked me, why I really like to help people. And I honestly, if we go back to the video of that, I really had to hold it in. I almost started breaking down emotionally because I really didn't know. But I love to read. And one of Eckhart Tolle's books, it said people that like to give and be generous and help people, it's almost a selfish thing because it makes them feel good. So I don't know if that's why, but I really generally love to help people. And I who knows why that is. And I think it's, you have to care about people. And, every team I've led, in the last, 35 plus years, will tell you I care, and I care about them as people. And, what I had Harry on the podcast last week, and I see a lot of similarities between Harry and I's leadership philosophy. And he's done it at stratospheric levels. So but I mean, we're very similar from a leadership perspective. And I think a lot of great leaders, and I humbly put myself in, at least close to that category. I would say, you have the same characteristics. You may do things a little bit different ways, but you all care. You want to make your team's job as easy as possible, that servant leadership mentality. So I don't know if it's a superpower, but that's what I would say about myself.
Yeah, I think the superpower is the consistency daily and weekly basis. A lot of people want to give, a lot of people want to help, but they do it for sporadic periods of time, which is fine. But what makes it a superpower for Jeff, for you, is that you do it every day. So that's the unique thing, I think, what makes it a superpower.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's very nice. I'm going to go back to your selling philosophy. So I think you did a podcast with Bob Berg. So I love the Go Giver book. I was in a job search one time and somebody recommended that book to me. And I have gifted that book more than almost any other book. But when I hear what you do and how you sell, I think it's that Go Giver mentality. So I'd love to hear your comments about that.
So I think I'm sure there's more people, but I put Randy Powell that put that podcast together, Dr. Michelle Robin and Peter Maluk and Terry Dunn on just like this huge pedestal. So Randy Powell is, one of the most amazing executives in Kansas City. And the gentleman's the CEO of a company, but he just wants to connect and help people. So I don't hold a candle to Randy. And then all of a sudden I get on a podcast and it's Bob Berg of the Go Giver. I'm like, whoa, this is wrong thing. So I'm trying to smooth it over and make Bob the center of attention, as he should be. Definitely. He's probably like, whoa, why am I paired up with this person? So I think it did a good job pivoting on that. But Bob Berg then flipped it around and tried to make the show about me, which was crazy. And it was really unbelievable. But because I'm not a big reader, because I'm dyslexic, I always tell people I read it, but not really. But I did read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, because it was on an 11-hour drive to and from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I think after 6 car trips, I finished the book. But the go-givers, my partners talk about it all the time, and they relate me to it. So that's very nice of people to say. I think it's self-serving to say that, but if you help people, that's the highest likelihood they're going to help you. And over time, to be really candid, I try to steer away from that, because if you just go blindly help people all day, every day, your time just infinitely gets taken away. And when my wife was pregnant with our first kiddo, he's now 5, I started not doing that. I started strategically, not just taking any and all meetings, but really trying to make sure that I'm taking meetings that I'm perpetuating my career for my partners and my family the way that I want to, but then also helping. So the way I draw the line is, if someone comes from a unique, diverse background or they need help, I will always meet with them. If they are an insurance guy or a banker or a financial advisor, marketing from a really nice family, I'm probably not going to spend time with them. I'll help them in any way I can. So I want to preface that I don't just blindly help a bunch of people, like many of the people I just referenced, or folks like yourself. I am selective on people I do help. So I'm not, just helping everyone. I don't want to use a Mother Teresa reference. I'm not. But if if they've come on hard times, or they're trying to learn, or they're young, absolutely. Like, I love doing that. But we wish we could all do that every day, all day. But I probably only do that like 4 or 5 times a week out of the 5, 7 meetings a day that I do. So it's not a huge chunk of time.
What are some of the companies in Kansas City that you really admire, and why?
So this is a question I get all the time. So I still help a ton of unemployed people today. There's just a lot of CEOs and CFOs. And so I always tell people, the grass is always greener when it's fertilized in bullshit. That's the problem a lot of people have, is I walk them through what their compensation is going to be, what companies are going to pay, because I have a pulse on the Kansas City market, not the market in general, but now as we go to more national companies. So there are very, 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 very few companies that just rock. And if you talk to insiders at these companies, they go through periods of not rocking or not rolling. So it's unique. And a lot of times Kansas City, because we're a 3rd-tier city and we don't have a lot of media, you can really put out the message you want in many ways. So buyer beware on companies. Just do due diligence. But companies that really rock, I would say, are Dimensional Innovations, North Point, Smart Warehousing, US Engineering. Those are companies that I really admire, and I think they do a really good job, and I think it's their leadership that does a really good job. Now, are they perfect? Absolutely not. But I think, Jeff, talking about your leadership style, they're great leaders. One thing they do is everyone knows where they stand. And so, if you're doing something within the company, you know what's expected, you know what's not expected. So if you do what's not expected, they remind you. And if you do what's not expected again, you may not be a part of the culture. And I think when someone can call balls and strikes, and where the guardrails are, that's a great company. And great leaders say, hey, here are the guardrails. If you get outside of it, that's on you. But if you stay within it, it's fine. And every success you have within those guardrails is your success. Every failure you have within those guardrails are my failure. I'll take the heat, you take the glory. But here are the guardrails. And I think those companies have them, and which allow them to continue to flourish over time.
Yeah, great points. When you go to KU and speak in front of seniors that are going to graduate, what do you tell them in terms of, what to focus on when they're trying to get a job after they walk the hill?
Yeah, so super passionate thing, and then unemployment went from 3.7 to 3.5 this past jobs report. So they're fine. If you're graduating, you're going to be A-okay. But the number one thing I tell people is respond quickly. I think it's a millennial thing. I don't know what happened. I don't know what baby boomers taught their kids like me, but respond quickly. we are aware that you don't have a lot going on in college. You could tell us you got a lot going on, but we were there for you for someone to respond within 24 hours is mandatory. And so if people are not responding within 24 hours and hopefully within the hour during business hours, so I tell them 8 to 5. If you're sleeping in, check your phone, wake up, respond to that email. But that's all you have to do. Just respond quickly. That's it.
Yeah, it's amazing. As you know, I've done a couple online programs teaching recent college graduates how to navigate the job search, because you're right, they're all going to get jobs. It just be proactive and try to get a great job that fits your personality, a great company that matches that. And it's a process. But they send me their resume, and I don't rewrite their resumes. They're college graduates. They can format a resume, but I could look at one, and in 10, 15 minutes, I can give them comments back and say, but one of the things I say is use your Gmail. Don't use ku.edu, because you're not going to have that, 2 weeks after you graduate or whatever the time period is. So you're not going to be able to check when they tell you have an interview coming up, or, you need to schedule an interview. So it's interesting.
The one thing that I do on a, not daily, but 4 to 5 days a week is I don't help anyone unless they create a top 10 list of opportunities. So if they create a top 10 list, not companies, absolutely not companies. Not that hard to think of cool companies and research them, but actual opportunities. And people are going to say, hey, the best opportunities aren't posted. I'm like, not really. Most are posted. And a lot of times when you interview at a position, they will oftentimes find you another position in the company, and then those don't exist. But you need an entry point. And so until they create a top 10 list, and again, this isn't someone that not a college, if they have a college degree, or someone that if they need help putting it together, I'll always help them put it together. But for the most part, that rarely happens. So if they don't create a top 10 list, I'll argue that they're saying, hey, Jeff, do the work for me. And what you're saying is take some responsibility, because that exercise is really meaningful. And they're going to say, well, I don't know about 10 companies I want to do. And I would say it doesn't need to be perfect. These 10 companies, none of them could be who you want to work for. Just put it on paper, lead the horse to water, and let those conversations flow. And if you have 1 or 2 on that top 10 and they don't work out, you got a new top 10 list. Add 2 more. And so by creating a top 10 list of opportunities and responding quickly, they are guaranteed to get a job with 3.5 unemployment.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I tell them to go through what they really like to do. Look through your debit or credit card statements. Where do you spend your money? Because that's what you like to do. And not that you're going to get a job at the Wheel or the Bull or whatever, but know thyself, right? Because you're going to get a job. But, there's 2 things about a great job. One is the company culture, which you can kind of find out about through networking and building relationships in those companies, and who you work for. Now, that even during an interview process, it's hard to discern, because people come off in an interview in their best self, and then they could be jerks later on. But, you can basically do the research, as well as, you need to negotiate, and you being in sales, you realize that. So do research on what they offer you and what other people are getting offered in that space, because if you can go from 42,000 starting salary to 47, that's worth over $1 million in the course of a career. I mean, because it becomes your baseline.
Yeah, and then the purpose of the top 10 list is, and to your point, you're exactly correct. But when someone if you're selling a house and someone makes an offer on the house, it's only worth what that one offer is. So you have to get multiple offers. So you have to crescendo it at the right time. And to do that, you need multiple opportunities. And if you're just deciding between one job, I was helping out a young person, and he basically made it apparent he didn't like the other job, and he told the employer that. And he was like, well, surely I'm worth like 20, 30 grand more of what they were trying to ask him to do. And he totally was. He was worth more. And I was like, unless you get another offer, they're going to stick to their guns. Why would they offer you more? It's like watching Shark Tank. It's like they're just going to, you say 40,000, and then you're like, but I'm worth 60. And you're like, 40,000. You're like, ooh, you didn't go up at all. So they don't have to. So yeah, if you can generate multiple offers, again, not rocket science from Jeff and Scott today, but a lot of times people don't do it.
No, exactly. Two things to conclude. Any crazy stories that a client of yours did, no names unless you want to reveal that, but any requests of you that were just unbelievable, or something they did, behavior on an outing to the ballpark that had maybe some other stops along the way after the game or something like that.
Usually that's more of me doing wild and crazy things. So I don't know if it's ever been like a person, but told a story the other week, and it was really cool. My business partner, Melissa, got to go to that meeting because she actually had she was meeting across First Bank for something personally. So she attended one. Usually I have no salespeople attend, but she got a chance to see someone that's been a really good friend and a really good client. And 7 years ago, she turned me down for about 3 years because she thought I was a financial advisor, which is fair. I mean, I've had that people before. They then refer us to a deal, which is a large dental clinic with a bunch of different dental clinics all throughout the Midwest. And then during the pandemic, they referred us to a 600 life medical group that we never met with, and we closed. And then a 8,000 life group that we closed. And so a person that 7 years ago wouldn't meet with me for 3 years ends up changing her and I's lives. And we're all super young. So we have 20 more years to work with each other. But the crazy stories I have are a chance of a chance of a chance that work out. Now, 99% of them don't work out. But if you do 100 of them, one of them will. And this one in particular worked out 3 more times. So it was kind of cool.
Wow, fantastic. So to close, let's 2 things. What advice would you give a young professional in the sales profession, and then 2 kind of people in their mid-career? What kind of leadership, things to focus in the leadership area? What advice would you give them?
7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You're always in the office. Respond quickly. And if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know, and you'll find out within 24 hours. And if you do that, people, they have nothing not to like about you. You're there, you're showing up, you're working hard. And then eventually, if you show neglect and you choose not to do something because you're not learning it or you're not doing it, that's on you. But in the beginning, you're not supposed to know anything. And they're going to take someone that shows up at 7 a.m. and leaves at 7 p.m. all day over someone that's way smarter, that thinks they know everything, that's only their, Gen Z quiet quitting thing, whatever it is. But, just you don't know what you don't know. Be honest about it and just work hard. And you don't have to be at the office at all times, but you do need to be there at 7 a.m. and you do need to leave at 7 p.m. And if you want work-life balance, you got a long, you're young. You can do it on the weekends. You can do corporate challenge in the evening. You can go to lunch with people. You can have plenty of work-life balance. So just because you're working an extra 2-3 hours doesn't mean you don't have work-life balance.
Yeah, and I think especially in sales and definitely post-pandemic, and I've always believed in this, people can do their work at any time, right? So just it's a blend, put I have a load of laundry going right now, right? So
same here. Look at that. No, I mean it's so true, and I think people miscommunicate that. Now, that is not advice for someone that is an engineer, an architect, an accountant. You can do whatever you want to do. Then you make another decision. Do you want executive pay or do you want associate pay? And if you want associate pay, leave at 4:30. You're fine. You're good. You have a degree. You have a skill set that will take care of you the rest of your life, and that is your decision. And it's a great one to have. You have freedom in that decision. But if you want to be an executive, don't be upset when the person at 7 o'clock is getting promoted and you're leaving at 4:30.
So what advice would you have for a young professional that wants to, become a great leader?
They have no other choice than to put in the time. And there's no secret sauce other than just you don't know what you don't know. You want to be authentic, but over time you learn and you learn and you learn, and you'll figure out what it is that you need. But the advice is just to learn, because every industry is different, every team is different, every business is different. So find the Jeffs of the world, let them teach you what to do, and just be, the class out. It's like the old coaching metaphor, be moldable. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I don't think there's not magic bullets, I think, to be successful, other than showing up and being willing and open to whatever someone needs.
Scott, you've been fantastic. Just like I thought. I admire you a ton. Thank you for participating and sharing your wisdom. You're very successful, and I'm happy and grateful that we're friends. Thanks for coming on.
I'm happy because folks like yourself and leaders like yourself took a chance and met with me for coffee.
Well, there you go. Have a great rest of the day. Wow, that was a fantastic episode with Scott Havens. I'm proud to call Scott a friend. I met him in his late 20s. I believe he's 36 now. I just love how what he's done in a short time period, and how he built resilience and grit, getting rejected from 60 to 70 jobs out of college. And then his first job with selling transportation and logistical service, knocking on doors in a 2-state region, 71,000 companies in that region. And that's how he really learned, I think, sales and relationships, and how he built success was he was not doing well, and he found ways to network and build relationships in groups that, he felt that, weren't getting supported, like unemployed people. So he would meet with unemployed people and then, help them connect with others that would help them get jobs, and women in business. So, when he graduated, it was like 2008, 2009. So just fantastic. I think he's brilliant. Joe, what were your takeaways from the episode?
What I like to think about is that Scott, if I can say this delicately, Scott is probably not your best student that you've ever interviewed, right? He found out late in life he's dyslexic. He crammed a 3-year degree into 5 years. He obviously drank his way through high school and through college and set up this bartending staffing service. That's not your academically challenged business venture, if you will. But he turns out later in life as being wildly successful in what he does in business, in spite of the moderate success, if any, that he had when he was in college. So I think that the story behind that, and I can say this as a former school teacher, that the story that he has is that your school experience is not necessarily indicative or predictive of the success that you're going to have in business. I know some people that have been valedictorians in their class that are barely moderately successful in business. And then some people like Scott that didn't worry about what he could get out of college. He just wanted to get out of college, and ends up being wildly successful in business. So when you're hiring, make sure that you're looking at things other than just their college experience or their GPA or something like that. There are intangibles that are better predictors of success in business than what your college experience would be.
Yeah, as well as the 2 references to one, Wayne's World 2 with Chris Farley and Rami and Michelle's high school reunion. So that made it an interesting episode. So based on Scott's, what he shared, any leadership tips that you want to impart on the audience?
Yeah, I'm always reminded of the quote from the great Dwight Schrute when he said, "When I'm deciding something to do, I always think, would a stupid person do that? If the answer is yes, I do not do that thing."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.